The Game of Thrones Season 6 premiere is over, but we're just getting started here on the Game of Thrones post-show recap on postshowrecaps.com. And now, here are the two guys that agree that a brand new Game of Thrones episode is one of the 5 best things in life. I'm Rob Cesternino, and here is Josh Wigler. Josh, how are you? Welcome back.
Top 5, baby!
Top 5, yes.
Top 5, yeah. It really is one of the great pleasures of life, is a new episode of Game of Thrones. Certainly after a very, 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 very long off season, we're back in business, Rob. You bastard, how you been?
It's been about 10 months since we had a new Game of Thrones episode to talk about, but here we are tonight, live, April 24th, 2016, and we are ready to go. And Josh, this is going to be a lot of fun to cover this with you. Of course, that you are very much in the thick of this. You have been reporting about Game of Thrones Season 6 for many months now for The Hollywood Reporter, and now here we are.
Upgrade,
finally have the new episode, and we can talk about it at last.
Yeah, at last. No, it's been fun. I've been covering the show for THR for the past several months. Now we're really in the thick of it, so I'm up to my eyeballs in Game of Thrones and have been for a little while, but I'd been waiting for a new episode for a good little while. Rob, you and I, we saw this 2 weeks ago. We were at the world premiere in LA. That was really cool. But you and I didn't, I feel like you and I didn't even really talk about it that much.
Yeah, we really didn't get to speak a lot about it. And actually,
I've been holding off for podcasting.
Yeah, we've been holding off, and I actually wasn't able to talk to you for this whole time from when I actually was on set, and I don't know if you actually knew this because I wasn't credited in the episode, but I am actually old Melisandre's body double.
Oh!
Yes.
Oh, well, I thought that looked familiar.
Yes.
And I just couldn't place it because the face was different, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, every morning I get naked and I look in the mirror and I say, I should just go back to bed.
Yeah, and then you put your ruby red earbuds in, and you look like this.
Yeah. No, that's actually what I look like when I take my shirt off. There's no necklace or anything like that.
It's a good look. It's better look than me. So.
Anyway, yeah, very excited to talk about this. Of course, this is the first of a plethora of Game of Thrones podcasts that we will bring you on postshowrecaps.com. We will have our feedback show coming up later on Wednesday. Of course, Josh Wigler, you will have the Game of Thrones book club, even though we're past the books.
We're past the books. We're away from the books, but I think as a lot of book readers will tell you after tonight, there's some commiserating that we're going to be needing to do throughout this season, I think. So at the very least, we're going to be doing that. Book Club podcast isn't going anywhere. It's staying here. Terry Schwartz and I are going to record on Tuesday afternoon. So you have until then to get us your questions. postshowrecaps.com/feedback or GOT@postshowrecaps.com.
Okay, if you don't want to miss any of that, you can subscribe to our Game of Thrones podcast feed or our main show, Post-Show Recaps feed. Go to postshowrecaps.com/iTunes for everything, or for just our Game of Thrones stuff, go to postshowrecaps.com/GOT iTunes. All right, let's start off with our top story at this hour. I know a lot of people, myself included, were expecting for the Jon Snow saga to have some sort of a resolution by the end of this first hour. Just like Generalissimo Francisco Franco, Jon Snow is still dead.
Wow. Yeah, Jon Snow is still dead. You really thought that we were going to get resolution to that within this first episode, Rob. You thought that we would come back, Game of Thrones Season 6, very first thing, Jon Snow is going to sit up. He's going to be like, oh, what a terrible dream. That was awful. I dreamed that I got stabbed in the chest by Ollie, the worst.
As I said in The Road to Westeros, I thought we were going to start off, boy, Jon Snow is dead, and I thought at the end of this hour, in an episode entitled The Red Woman, I thought that Melisandre would resurrect Jon Snow at the end of this first hour. I felt like that's where we were going, where we see her sort of in that last scene. I said, okay, here we go. Did not get that. He is still dead, and maybe I'm starting to have to prepare myself because I firmly believe that Jon Snow will be brought back to life at some point this season, but I think that we might be in for a long slog through the Jon Snow resurrection.
Yeah, I don't know how long they can put it off if they're going to go there, and I'm with you. I totally agree. I think Jon Snow is coming back. I am as sure about that as I am about anything on this show, which is to say not very sure about a lot, considering there's really no book material to go off of anymore. I'm as in the dark as anybody, but I feel like narratively it makes so much sense for Jon to come back. There's so many reasons for Jon to come back. We can dive into all of that if you want. We can, pick that apart. I think a lot of people already know some of that stuff, but I think for me, what's going to be interesting to see is how long it goes if Jon does return. I think what's in the favor of the Jon Snow thing coming back right now is that it was a fairly quick period of time elapses in the Night's Watch story. It's really not more than, like 15 hours? It's really very kind of contained. So depending on where we are with the Night's Watch story next week or the week after that, if time is sort of moving at a crawl, then I think that really plays in the favor of Jon Snow can come back. But I feel like that body's going to start decomposing. It's going to do the thing that Cersei
will tell you. Yeah,
she'll tell you all the gory details about that. So at a certain point, you got to assume that this has to happen fairly quickly. I would bet that within the next 2 or 3 episodes. I think by the end of episode 3, we've got Jon Snow back in the land of the living.
Okay, we will see what happens. Josh, that you mentioned, you reported on it right after we saw the premiere episode, that Kit Harington's name is still in the credits. He did not get the Stephen Yeun treatment.
No, he is not hiding in a dumpster anywhere. They are keeping Kit Harington's name in the credits. In the defense of Game of Thrones, that's sort of the tradition anyway. You know, thinking back to when Tywin Lannister gets killed in the season 4 finale and Charles Dance shows up as a corpse in the season 5 premiere, his name remains in the credits. So and as far as I know, Tywin Lannister is not coming back. I think that was pretty permanent. So I don't think that it's, an end-all, be-all that Kit Harington's name is still in the opening credits, but it's there, so read into that as you will.
Did he stay in the credits through all of season 5?
No, it's just for the episode that he appeared in. But that's the way that it goes with Game of Thrones most often, is if somebody's not in the episode, their name doesn't appear in the opening credits.
Okay, let's talk Melisandre, and what does this mean? What was the significance for you to show her in that state, taking off the necklace and revealing herself to be quite old?
Old! Really, really old. Shockingly old. I think, that was great. That was really, really fun. That's the kind of thing that I'm really excited about season 6 because it's going to surprise the hell out of me. Because there's so much that I don't know, and there's so much that we just cannot predict based on the fact that there's no source material to judge on for so much of this right now. The Melisandre thing really excited me on that level because this is not in the books. Whoa. There's suggestion, it's hinted at. There are certainly teases that Melisandre is older than she lets on, but this was a big, flat-out reveal, and it was very surprising. It was very shocking. I think in terms of where she is thematically, where she is literally on the show too, is she's really at a horrible low, and she's tired, and she's exhausted, and everything that she's invested herself in has lost. Stannis dies. That whole cause is gone. She's completely incorrect about Stannis being the chosen one. And then she comes back to the wall, and it's probably she's thinking, well, at least I saw Jon Snow in the fires at a battle at Winterfell, so I've got that horse to back now, and suddenly Jon Snow is dead. So I think that she's really, really tired. We know now that she's really, really old. I think she's just exhausted emotionally and physically, and her going into bed at the end of that episode is just kind of really stressing the fact that things are really bleak right now for many of these characters, and I think Melisandre physically exemplifies that the best, of being this person who is thought of so sensually and seductively, and is really the one of the most physically attractive characters on the show, and that person is just completely torn down and worn down. So to see that example on your screen, I think, is a really cool symbol of the state of the union here in Westeros.
Okay, that line where she says she saw Jon Snow fighting in the flames at Winterfell. Now, we haven't seen Jon Snow fighting at Winterfell since the premiere, and he was sparring. So is that prophecy that Jon Snow is at? What did she see?
Yeah, I mean, we know that Melisandre, she looks into the fires, she sees things, she thinks she knows things, she feels like she can see into the future a little bit. Her prophecies come true. They don't always come true. I think that they often don't come true the way that she thinks that they're supposed to come true. Anything that she was thinking about Stannis being this superhero that she had really hyped him up to be obviously did not come through. So I think that, you got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Maybe she really did just see Jon Snow sparring at Winterfell. Maybe that's literally it. But if you want to read more into it, and we certainly have proof positive that Melisandre is capable of magical stuff. We saw the Shadow Baby. We already knew that. And now we see that this whole hot Melisandre thing is a glamour. So we know that she's got some tricks up her sleeve. So if you want to believe that that sort of predictive power that she has is her misunderstanding things a little bit, rather than her, having a ruse, pulling a ruse, I think that you got to imagine that there's something to come up with that. What it's going to be, how that's going to come to bear, who the hell knows? But she certainly seemed to think that Jon Snow had a big part to play in things moving forward.
Josh, something interesting that I saw, and I don't know if you've had a chance to watch this yet, is they do the HBO extra right after, like inside the episodes that they post right after it ends. And usually a lot of it is sort of fluff, but you hear from Benioff and Weiss. Sometimes it's interesting to hear what they were going for in a certain scene. And I thought it was actually very interesting how they described that scene with Melisandre. They talked about how she's looking in the mirror and she's seeing that her whole self is a lie, and she's having to face that reality that everything about her is a lie to this point. And so I thought that that wasn't my read on it in terms of watching the episode the whole way through. What does that mean for you, just hearing that idea of looking at herself as a lie?
Yeah, I think that, it stresses this idea that everything that she has believed in is out the window. It's all trash. It's in the dumpster. She'd been fighting for all of this stuff.
Like Glenn.
Yeah, and it just did not come through for her. I think that that's really what it signifies, and I think that, for her, she is probably thinking, all of this is bungus. Everything that I think that I am is nothing. I think that she is at a low. I don't think that we've ever seen Melisandre this low ever on the show, and we saw her at a low in the season 5 finale. She's really, really rock bottom right now. For my money, that really puts her in a really great spot to do some good at some point in the near future. I really do think that Melisandre will be key in bringing Jon Snow back. And the fact that she is so old, that she is so ancient, makes me feel like that could be at her own expense. Like it could be, an act like this could be something that would really be like a final act of magic for Melisandre. I feel like she would be cool with that at this point. So that's sort of where my head is at, that I think that something sort of sacrificial might be coming our way through Melisandre.
Yeah, she did get the name of the episode, the Red Woman, which I feel like that she did not factor very much in the episode. I feel like that there's some added significance on her based on getting the title of the episode.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that that's definitely a good read.
The titular character, if you will.
The titular character. Yeah, she is often thought of as the Red Woman, and she gets the final scene of the episode, and it really was a jaw dropper. I mean, watching that happen, it was kind of just like, oh man, oh boy, yeah. Poor Gendry.
Gendry, yeah.
Poor Gendry. It's really
Changes
tough.
everything.
Changes everything.
Now, how do you think that this plays out? Now, you have a couple things going on here. You have Thorne trying to make this deal with Davos. You also have the whole business with Dolores Ed going out and trying to bring the wildlings back. But it's Davos who says, hey, there's still the Red Woman. And usually he's kind of a cynic about her, even though he did see the smoke baby come out of her.
Right.
But he's like, hey, guys, hold on. We still have the Red Woman, which sort of sets up that scene. So how do you think it plays out? Is it some combination of all those things happening at once?
That's the thing, is this is such a powder keg, the situation at the Night's Watch, which is why I think it's going to play out fast. I think that things that are happening here, I don't think it's going to be much more than a couple of days, and that feels even a little long to me. It's just based on how fraught the situation is. You've got Thorne on one side of the door saying, open up, let us in. And you've got Davos on the other side being like, I'm not letting you in unless you have mutton. You have that whole thing, and you've got Ed, he's on the run, he's looking for wildlings, and once the wildlings find out that Jon Snow is not only dead but was killed the way he was, can't imagine that's going to go very well for Alliser Thorne and everybody. On top of that, Jon Snow is dead. He is decomposing probably at this point. Things are already happening there. In order for him to come back and really be believably alive, that really does have to happen fairly soon. So how I see it playing out is I feel like all of that stuff is going to explode. I feel like all of that is going to come to a head very, very quickly, possibly as soon as next week or the week after that at the most, I think. And I feel like it's all, as it's coming to a head, as it's all kind of, bashing into each other, I think that that's where you get Jon Snow. He's going to lurch awake, and everyone is going to kind of be like, oh, well, I didn't realize that we killed the Chosen One. Clearly we goofed here. So I think that that's where we're headed.
One of the things that we haven't talked about a lot with this story has been the role of Ghost in any of this. Do you think that he will have some sort of a part in the reanimating of Jon Snow? Whether that there's some idea that maybe Jon Snow could have warged into him. There's some thought of maybe does Melisandre have to sacrifice Ghost to bring Jon Snow back?
No sacrificing Ghost. We Can't lose any more dire wolves.
He is really making a lot of noise throughout that whole opening scene, and I like to watch these shows with the closed captioning on, and there's a lot of mentions of Ghost howling, Ghost making noise, Ghost growling. And so do you think that he is going to potentially have to be part of this solution?
Well, we know that the dire wolves and the Stark kids are really hooked into each other. You know, Grey Wind used to know like everything wrong ahead of Robb Stark. You know, even at the Red Wedding, Grey Wind is basically like, no, this isn't good. I can sense bad things are happening. We've certainly seen the really tight connection between Bran and Summer in the past, and even with Jon and Ghost. Ghost has really been Jon's ride or die, dire wolf. And I think that we know that close relationship exists, so Ghost is really attuned to something like, you know, Jon Snow dying. He's really going to pick up on that. There's a lot more of an emphasis on Jon Snow's potential as a warg in the books. We haven't really seen anything about that on the show, but I know a lot of people who have read the books really do think that the warging thing with Ghost, that could be something that could lead the way to Jon coming back. I just feel like the show has done nothing with that, with Jon as a character, that I'd be pretty surprised if that is somehow playing a role. But I mean, how would that work, do you think, Rob? Is Jon Snow in Ghost right now? Is that your read on it, if that's the way that we're going?
Well, he was talking a lot.
Yeah, he was talking. It's like, guys, it's me.
Yeah.
I'm Jon Snow.
Yeah.
I'm a dog now.
Yeah. I was wondering, how did they go and get him? It seemed like, I guess that when they were dragging him back, they must have, somebody's like, oh, go get the direwolf.
If it was Look Who's Talking Now rules, who would be the voice of Ghost with Jon Snow inside? Would it just be Kit Harington, or do we get somebody celebrity like Danny DeVito? Do we get a Diane Keaton in there?
Any of those would work for me.
Any of those would work. Yeah, Danny DeVito as Ghost Jon Snow would be really good.
Yeah, and from what I understand, those dogs also love mutton.
They love mutton. Who's mutton?
If you're hiding the mutton around there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else up at the wall you want to touch on before we start to bounce around?
Who's gonna die in this situation? You got to imagine some of these people that we know. Like Alliser Thorne has to be at the end of the rope here.
Yes, hopefully, and Ollie right behind him.
Man, Ollie is the worst.
Yeah.
Ollie still sucks. He's really terrible.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, I know you said that you feel like that there will be some sort of, like, most of these people that are at the Night's Watch are going to see Jon Snow come back to life and say, oh my god, I've made a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
But do you think that there will be a sort of, the chance of a battle? Will a lot of these guys just get wiped out when the wildlings come back through? Will there be a reckoning?
A reckoning, yeah. A reckoning could be coming to the Night's Watch. I feel like there aren't going to be a lot of people left at the Night's Watch who aren't loyal to Jon if Jon comes back. I feel like that's going to be pretty cut and dry. Like, okay, let's fall in line behind the guy who was dead 5 minutes ago and is no longer dead, who was conclusively dead just a few minutes ago. Let's probably take our orders from that guy. So whether or not that means that the wildlings wipe out Alliser Thorne and all of the mutineers before Jon comes back, or if Jon were to come back and that really scares everybody straight, I'm not sure how it would play out, but I really don't think that there's going to be too many traitors in the midst after Jon Snow comes back. Okay. If he comes back. Hopefully he comes back. I don't mean to keep driving home like the false hope if he doesn't. It's entirely possible that he doesn't. I just really feel like he's going to.
Okay. Let's go down into the north and talk about what's going on at Winterfell. And that was a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of last season, where what was going to happen with Theon and Sansa. We see them on the run, and I think that probably the biggest pop in the episode has to be when they are making their way and they're captured by the Bolton men, and It looks like they're going to be dragged back to the clutches of Ramsay, and then here comes the cavalry in Brienne and Pod, who then fight off everybody. How huge of a moment was that for you?
It was awesome. It was really, really great. I remember watching that, next to you, like the whole moment where Brienne is pledging to Sansa and Sansa is incorporating her into her army and everything like that. I was like very close to the edge of tears. I thought this was a real tear-jerking scene. I just didn't want to cry in front of you, Rob, because I wanted to be cool. But it was awesome. It was intense. It was a really great moment. It's great to see Sansa Stark get a very rare win. I feel like good things don't happen to Sansa very often, so the fact that something really great happened here, that was nice. And Brienne was just such a badass. Finally, Brienne, after her abandoning her post to kill Stannis Baratheon in the season 5 finale, you kind of had to wonder, like, did she just like completely miss the window here? Thankfully, she did not. Thankfully, she showed up just in the nick of time here.
Yeah, so many horrible things have happened to Sansa, but to me, this feels like the beginning of a season of Sansa rising. Do you have the same read on that, or is that a dangerous way to think in Game of Thrones?
I think it's a dangerous way to think when it comes to Game of Thrones, and I think that even the greatest triumph on this show isn't going to happen without some measure of tragedy. Even if this is the season where Sansa finally things turn up for her, that's not going to happen without something else that's totally effed up happening. Like, that's just the way of Game of Thrones. She thinks that she can go to the wall and go hang out with Jon Snow and he'll help her, but whoops, he's dead. So, that's the level of excitedness that we should ever have about anything possibly good on this show. That being said, I feel like so many bad things have happened to Sansa in the past. We've seen Sansa learn how to politically wheel and deal throughout her time on the show. She's finally free of being somebody's hostage for the first time in a very, very long time. I feel like this is a good spot for Sansa, assuming she can get somewhere warm. It looks pretty cold out there.
Yeah, the north or going to the wall seems like maybe the wrong direction for her.
Just get her to a fire, just get her warmed up a little.
But just the fact that she's now paired up with Brienne, where finally that Brienne has something to do for the first time, really, since she left the service of Jaime.
Yeah, literally just staring at a candle throughout basically all of season 5.
Yeah,
and that was really Brienne's whole thing.
But this is exciting that Sansa actually has somebody who has her best interest in mind for maybe the first time since all the way back in the first season.
It's great. It's really, Littlefinger, you got to imagine Littlefinger is Team Sansa, but he's Team Littlefinger at the end of the day.
Yeah, he's pretty sleazy.
He's Team Sansa because he's Team Littlefinger, and Team Sansa means that Littlefinger moves forward. I think Brienne is purely Team Sansa. Brienne is, I am honoring my oaths. I am keeping my oaths. I swore to Catelyn Stark that I'd protect you. I'm going to do that. I'm a woman of my word. And I think that it's really all about that. It's just about her service to Sansa. It's got nothing to do with Brienne herself. That's great. That's really good for Sansa to have somebody like that on her side. Certainly seems like Theon is in that mode as well right now, right? Like, this is a great night for Theon, who finally came out of his shell in the season 5 finale when he throws the total Miranda off the cliff, and that's really great. But we didn't know if that was the start of something or if it was just a momentary thing. Based on how he acts in this episode, you got to imagine that Theon is all in on Sansa Stark as well.
Yes, seemingly Theon is back, or as far back as he can get.
As much of him as he can pull together.
Right. He not only, pushes Sansa to keep going, and he takes her across the river. He decides to, ford the river with her, not caulk the wagon.
No, you don't want to caulk the wagon. No.
Right. And, let me not go there.
Okay. All right.
And then also...
Go easy.
Yeah, then we also have where Theon tries to sacrifice himself. It says, she's gone, take me, I'll go back to Ramsay. And then finally we see him take out a guy who was going to kill Podrick. So it seems as though Theon is all in as well. Do you think that this is the start of his service to Sansa as well, or do you think that he's going to go off and have his own story here?
Well, what would his story be? What would be the next direction for that character to go in if it's not to continue on with Sansa? How do you see that working out?
Well, is that how you get the Greyjoy angle back in the mix here?
Right.
Does he head home?
Right, but would that be him freelancing again? Would that be him being, returning to the Iron Islands because he's just, sick of being a part of this thing, he just wants to go and see his family again? Or is that going to be on behalf of Sansa if he does something like that?
No, I can't. What business does he have on behalf of Sansa?
I feel like it would work. I feel like, for him, he's really, he's trying to... I feel like he's trying to atone for a lot of that really crummy stuff that he did in the past. I feel like he wants to make good for Sansa.
Then stay with Sansa.
All right.
Then follow her around. I think that's how you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, not for anything that he got screwed over pretty good by the Greyjoys back in Season 2 when he stormed Winterfell himself.
It doesn't typically go well for Theon when he gets his family involved. I feel like, for him, if they're going to get involved, let them get involved on their own. I don't know that Theon ought to be seeking that out on his own. It doesn't feel like it would work out well.
Yeah. All right, so we'll see what happens ultimately with Sansa and Brienne. Anything else? Well, let's talk about the Boltons as well.
Yeah. What did you think of Ramsay's Miranda eulogy?
It seemed like, oh boy, Ramsay really cared about her. It seems like there's a whole side of him. And then he's like, what are you talking about, bury her? That's good meat.
Yeah, it's good meat. Feed her to the dogs.
Yeah, feed it to the dogs.
Yeah.
Poor. But for Miranda, the stable girl, that's how she wanted to go out.
Yeah, that was in her will. She's like, if I die, I want you to feed me to my dogs.
Yes.
That's what I want to have happen next. That's the next thing. It's unique. It's unique.
Yeah. She's like, you get me, Ramsay.
Yeah, at least it's original.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I think that was, I just thought that was a really funny button to that scene of like, you're finally seeing Ramsay be like a normal-ish guy for the first time for like Ramsay standards. Like, this is Ramsay being gentle and emotional and sensitive, and he's, sharing how he's feeling. And you really understand, he cared about this girl as much as Ramsay can care about anything other than himself. Says that she's one of the few people on the planet who didn't like get frightened looking at him, and had a very long history with this person. And then he just decides, yeah, but she could just get eaten by dogs.
Yeah.
So like that's the nicest Ramsay Bolton possible. Is he's still feeding you to dogs.
And Roose ends up having a conversation with Ramsay and talks about really how badly he screwed things up. And while, yes, okay, Stannis is gone, but they lost Sansa, which was really the key to holding the North. She's gone. They also lost Theon, who was also kind of important for the Greyjoys. And now they're really starting to feel the heat because now they ended up really taking Sansa on board was sort of a slap in the face to the Lannisters. That's going to be a factor. It's something that they have to deal with. And now the walls are starting to close in on them a little bit. Now, I don't want to go too far into the coming attractions, but they're talking about going to Castle Black. Why on earth? What do the Boltons need at Castle Black?
Well, I think that if you think about it, if Sansa and Theon survived that fall, evidence suggests that they did. They sent out, Ramsay sent out his best hounds. He sent out a search party. That search party caught up with Sansa. Obviously, that search party is no more, but they had enough to go on that clearly Sansa and Theon survived that fall. Where does Sansa go from here? What friends in the world does she possibly have here in the North? There's a lot of different places in the North that the Boltons can have their fingers on the pulse of, but one of them is, and it's a logical place, would be Castle Black, where her half-brother is the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. It would make a lot of sense for Sansa to go there to seek protection from somebody from her own family, from a brother of hers. So I think for Ramsay and Roose, at that point, it's like, let's at least look at Castle Black. Let's at least consider that option. What are they going to do in terms of going to Castle Black? If they think that they're going to pick a fight with the Night's Watch, that would be a very bold move, I feel like.
Bolton move.
Yeah, Bolton move. But, the Boltons, that's what they do. They are opportunistic, and they seize on moments. They think unconventionally. So I could see it. I could see them going in that direction.
Okay, let's talk about the action that was really taking place between King's Landing and in Dorne. Let's talk about the Sand Snakes making their move.
Yeah, finally. I mean, man, the Sand Snakes were, they were totally defanged in Season 5. I was very excited to see the Sand Snakes on the show, and they really didn't measure up. And I remember back when you and I were recording feedback shows and stuff for Season 5, that you really got a kick out of the internet's reaction to the Sand Snakes.
Yeah. Internet hates the Sand Snakes.
Not really in. I wonder how they feel about the Sand Snakes tonight. The Sand Snakes showed some teeth tonight.
Yeah, I don't know. They really did strike back in a big way. And so, Josh, now as somebody who, we've talked about a little bit, and we don't have to explore too much of what goes on in the books.
Yeah.
That there is a lot of stuff that happens in Dorne differently, and now
super differently,
and now a lot differently here.
A lot differently. Yeah. It had already been really different. This basically just kills everything that we knew about the Dorne storyline is pretty much out the window. So it was fun. I think that the Dorne storyline just did not really work last year. And I think one of the big problems was nobody felt dangerous. Nobody felt like they really could cause a problem for anybody. You get that final or that initial conflict. You finally get an encounter between Jaime and Bronn and the Sand Snakes, and the only blood that is drawn is like a slight slash on the arm for Bronn, who ends up getting poisoned from that. But really nothing happens, and it just feels like one of the lamest battles in the entirety of Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones does not have a lot of lame battles.
Yeah.
And it really, for all of the people who were involved in that altercation, it really could have been a lot cooler and should have been in terms of being true to those characters. I think that the course correction here to show up in the season 6 premiere with the Sand Snakes just offing people.
Right.
That feels like maybe some people think that it's, over course correction. I think that it's the right move. I think that that's what we were missing from Dorne, is seeing these people actually capable of changing things up, not just having bark, but having some bite to back it up.
So what you're saying is that tomorrow on the Game of Thrones Reddit, there won't be a video of Trystane getting stabbed through the face set to the Benny Hill music.
I don't think so. I don't think so, but maybe now that you put that out into the universe, it's going to exist.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay.
Possibly.
So they had like 2 big moves. They ended up having the business with the murder of Prince Doran.
R.I.P. Dr. Bashir.
Yeah, and Arya Hota also goes down.
Yeah, that was a bummer. Very sad to see Arya Hota go, I guess. He never really did it on the show. That axe was supposed to be a lot cooler than it was, but he just gets slammed in the back and it's done.
It's done. And then we see Trystane also that
was so gross. Yeah, he just got totally faced. It was so nasty.
Yeah, but a real shocking moment of, which one of us do you want to kill you?
Yeah.
And then the line, you greedy bitch.
Right.
I was supposed to kill him.
Yeah, it was great. It was sort of, that funny kind of Indiana Jones sort of gag of Indy is going up against the guy who's twirling with his sword and everything, and you're expecting some big fight, and then Indiana Jones just pulls out the gun and shoots the guy. Spoilers for Indiana Jones. But that's basically, you think that Trystane is going to have this big fight with one of the Sand Snakes, potentially both of the Sand Snakes, and then he just has his face rocked off immediately. Sucks.
Okay. So, Josh, the Sand Snake storyline and everything from Dorne, where is this going here? I know they want revenge on the Lannisters, but it does seem like the Lannisters kind of have their hands full with the whole High Sparrow business.
Yeah.
How is this going to, what are we going to see play out?
Great time for the Dornish to strike against the crown, right? I mean, while King's Landing is so busy, and I can't imagine that they really know that. I don't know how quickly word traveled that Cersei was in trouble with the High Sparrow and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But, man, really fortuitous timing in terms of Ilaria Sand and her people deciding to take over Dorne, make this move, and let's kick some Lannister butt. Because you're right, the Lannisters absolutely have their hands full. They don't only have this High Sparrow situation, but there's also the very palpable, understandable, emotional grief that comes with losing a child. So I feel like, the Lannisters are going to have to pull that together really quick. Otherwise, the combination of the High Sparrow and the Dornish people is really it's gonna rough them up pretty bad.
So you feel like that this looks more like that Dorne is going to attack King's Landing more so than the Sand Snakes are going to attack the Lannisters.
It seems like the Sand Snakes and Dorne are, basically synonymous at this point. I mean, Prince Doran is dead. Arya Hota is gone. Trystane is gone. All of the people that were Team Doran are deceased. And Ilaria Sand makes her move, and she even says when she's killing the prince, she says, you are so disconnected you didn't even realize that people in your own court look at you like a weakling. Weak men will never rule Dorne again. I think it's her declaration that the Sand Snakes are in charge.
Do not talk to Dr. Bashir that way.
I know. It's very sad. Very sad ending for Dr. Bashir. Stephen Fishback's favorite character on Game of Thrones. He's very upset about what happened to Prince Doran right now.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about the Lannister reaction to everything. And we got to see a very sad moment when Cersei got to find out about Marcella and what happened to her in the season finale. And then we get to see a scene with her and Jaime talking about this. But, Josh, I'm really curious to know, how is Cersei going to internalize this news? Are we going to see a different Cersei, or are we going to see a Cersei who is even more vindictive than the one that we've previously seen?
I think that is the question. That's the question surrounding Cersei, is how does she react to losing a second child and now only having one left? And we certainly know that she is latching on to this prophecy, the Maggie the Frog prophecy. She's saying oh yeah, that's real. That's
F
legit.
prophecy.
Yeah, F prophecy. She's really buying into that at this point. There's Jaime, this wasn't your fault. It's unavoidable. The Woodland Witch once upon a time told me about this thing. So this is just happening. This is just fate. So we already know that that's her immediate reaction. Whether or not that's really going to drive her and she's just going to be mourning and being really, really deeply, morbidly depressed and sidelined because of this. That doesn't feel like Cersei to me. The Cersei reaction to me feels like now you go nuclear, right? I mean, like now you only got one kid left. At this point, your back is against the wall, and you're just going to do whatever you can to protect that child, probably to that kid's detriment ultimately. But I feel like Cersei and Jaime, and you get it in the line from Jaime, who I'm really interested in your take on Jaime. Jaime, to me, feels like he is ready to go full Lannister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for Jaime, this was to have this happen right in front of him and to see Cersei hurt like this, and maybe for him, this is his chance to win Cersei back once again after she seemed so down on him over the last season or two.
Right.
And maybe that's his move, but I don't know. What is the bigger threat in your mind right now? The High Sparrow for the Lannisters or Dorne?
High Sparrow right now. I mean, they're both big threats, but High Sparrow's in town. The High Sparrow is here. He's got the Faith Militant. They have the Dornish. They drew blood against the Lannisters in terms of they killed Myrcella. That's a really big deal. But the Faith Militant arrested Cersei and forced her to march in the streets naked, shamefully, in front of everybody in King's Landing, and everybody in King's Landing seemingly loved it. So popular opinion is already against the Lannisters on their home turf, where they physically are right now. They have to deal with that above all else.
I thought it was interesting we got a scene from Marjorie tonight, who's really been sidelined, that she's locked up in the High Sparrow headquarters, and now that she's still there trying to get a confession out of her. We saw a scene with Marjorie. Where do you think that this Marjorie storyline is going?
I have no idea. Marjorie, she seems like, do you think that she's, the High Sparrow says something like, you still got many miles to go, but it seems like the High Sparrow was impressed with her taking steps towards redemption a little bit. Is she going to be Team High Sparrow ultimately? Is she going to have to align with Cersei? I'm not really sure where this is going. It would be interesting to see the Tyrells have to work with the Lannisters. But it felt to me a little bit like there was almost something paternal between the High Sparrow and Marjorie, at least that's the direction that maybe she is going to be leaning into a little bit. Where do you think this is going?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we saw the Queen of Thorns involved with this a little bit last season, but it'll be interesting to see if they get them back. I mean, do the Tyrells decide do they go full confession, and do they end up...
Confess!
Do they end up trying to turn this around on the Lannisters?
Right.
What's their play in all this, or do they have to, to try to defeat the High Sparrow? Do we have to see another uneasy truce between the Lion and the Rose?
Right. I think that a big part of this is going to be whatever is going on with Loras. We didn't see Loras. I think Marjorie could only play ball, and the Queen of Thorns could only play ball for so long as things are okay with Loras. And I don't know how they talk the High Sparrow out of being harsh against that guy. The High Sparrow does not seem to look kindly on Loras' sexuality. Is that going to be ultimately a really, really, really impossible to reverse situation for him? And I think that once we see what the reaction there is, once we find out what the High Sparrow's plan for Loras is going to be, I think that'll dictate to us whether or not the Tyrells could possibly play ball with the High Sparrow.
Okay. Let's ready to go east?
Yeah, of course. Let's go east. Let's ride.
All right, I guess the top story at this hour, Dany is in the custody of the Dothraki, and she is headed to go and live out her days in some sort of senior assisted living community of the widows of all of the Khals.
Yeah, apparently she is going to Vias Dothrak, where she is going to have to hang out with the fellow widowed Khaleesi for the rest of her days, and I think now we know that is going to be definitively the direction that Daenerys Targaryen's story goes in. She's never going to make it to Westeros. Spoiler alert, she's just going to be hanging out in a community with fellow widows for the rest of her life. It's going to be great. Riveting stuff.
The other women that hang out with that Khal over there, Khal Moro, is that his name?
Khal Moro, yeah.
Khal Moro. That they really they're really haters, all of those women, and they're talking about cut her head off, and that's how the Khal knows that she's very beautiful.
Right.
But they really even at the end when they're like, you have to go live with all the widows.
Yeah.
They really, at first I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound so bad, but they really making it sound like it's not that fun.
It's like, oh man, you haven't met the widows yet. Those people are depressing. It's going to be really unenjoyable for you when you have to go and live with those people. Yeah, they know something Dany doesn't know. But yeah, they seem really jealous of Dany. They seem to not like her very much. But we've seen how Dany can make friends and influence people in the past. Who knows? Like maybe she'll win them over. She's been really good with the Dothraki in the past.
Yeah, it's probably an easy place to find her if that we ever have that Jorah and Daario get a rescue mission and they try to figure out like, oh, okay, she's with the Dothraki. Where would she be? Like, oh, they have a place where they bring all the widows of the former Khals.
Right.
Let's go there.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than just like with some random horde.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably, if they know the Dothraki as well as we can probably assume that they do, Jorah from having lived with them for a while, they might have a decent idea of where things might go next for Dany. I feel like that rescue mission that's got to go into effect pretty soon here, right?
Yeah. You would think so. Just with Dany and Khal Moro, how great was the scene with Khal Moro ranking the greatest things in life?
Yeah. Do you have the list in front of you of what he ranked as the best?
I do not. We can get that in order for the feedback show later on this week, and we could weigh in on that.
Yeah, and I'd like to know if that's just Khal Moro individually, or if most Dothraki would agree with what that top 5 baby list looks like. Yeah, that was really great. I like this character so far. It's. I think that it's fun to see the Dothraki back in the mix. They add a lot of gruff energy. They're very rude people. The things that they were saying about Dany, not very kind, not super polite. But there is sort of this rawness to the Dothraki that we haven't really seen on the show since they were super prominent in season 1. That feels kind of nostalgic seeing these guys back in the mix. I like that Khal Moro is like totally in on Khal Drogo. He was like a big Khal Drogo fan apparently. Yeah. So he's like, oh, Dany, I didn't know. Oh, that sucks. So he seems like he's on the level. He seems like a decent dude.
Okay. Meanwhile, back in Meereen, I was pumped up for the Varys and Tyrion show to get going. We ended up seeing them just sort of walking around, sort of getting a lay of the land. Definitely a funny scene where Varys is telling Tyrion that the woman thinks he's trying to eat the baby.
Get in my belly! Yeah, he's going to just try to eat the child.
Yeah.
Who knew?
I ate a baby.
I ate a baby. Yeah, but I think that even Tyrion and Varys walking around and talking, that's still some of the most compelling stuff we saw in the entire episode. And that's not a knock against anything else from the episode. It's just when those two are together and they're talking shop, your eyes are glued to it. Like, you just can't look away.
Now, the thing that I took away from their conversation, I thought that was the most interesting, where Varys talks about how, the Sons of the Harpies seem to be well-funded. Somebody is giving orders to the Sons of the Harpy. Do you think that it is possible that it is anybody we know, or it's just going to be that, okay, there is some big bad master that we're going to learn about?
Yeah, I don't know. When you think about, who the possible candidates of that could be, does anyone immediately come to mind that we've come across here on Game of Thrones, especially in the Essos storyline?
Littlefinger.
Littlefinger? Could Littlefinger be funding the Sons of the Harpy?
There's nobody.
I mean, who's got the money to do that we know of? Nobody comes to mind immediately off the top of my head, but that's why it will probably be somebody that we know, because it's just going to be like this big left field blind side that none of us are going to see coming.
But pretty much all the major characters are pretty preoccupied with their own things to be running the Sons of the Harpies, right?
Hard to imagine that Daario Naharis has time to work that thing out and also run the Sons of the Harpy.
You would think so.
He's got a lot to handle on his own.
The other thing that I thought was of note, besides all the ships burning, was that they end up stumbling upon somebody who is preaching about the Lord of Light, and basically that is seemingly catching on in Dany's absence. What do you think that has to do in terms of people switching over and becoming part of followers of the Lord of Light? We also saw last season where
Atlantis,
where he was first in the brothel, that there was a red priestess there.
Yeah, and so this has been a thing that's been simmering on Game of Thrones for a little while. This story of the Red Priest and R'hllor and the Lord of Light and everything like that. The fact that this episode is called The Red Woman ends with this big Melisandre moment. We know that she is the lead advocate for the Lord of Light on the show as far as people that we've met. But that's starting to expand a little bit. There's that woman in Volantis we see last season. There's this Silver Fox Red Priest here in this episode. Come on, man, that guy looked great. He's got his own thing that he's preaching here as well. So it definitely has my eye. It has me interested that the Red Priest thing seems to be a big deal on the show, or a developing big deal. This is based on a series of books called A Song of Ice and Fire. The ice stuff is pretty well established. There's the Night's King and the White Walkers north of the Wall, and that threat is coming. We've seen fire with the dragons, of course, but there's an actual religion that is based around fire, and some of those people exist in Westeros where winter has arrived, pretty much. The fact that that's building up more and more here in Essos suggests that storyline is going to be pretty widespread. It's going to be pretty global. So I don't know how that factors in everything, but definitely something that we need to be watching.
Okay, and then Jorah and Daario are on the hunt. They end up finding the ring that Dany dropped in the season finale. Are you enjoying the broad trip between Jorah and Daario?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like these guys who have been romantic rivals, it feels like they've got more in common than they think. Even Daario's like, hey, Jorah, I want to be you when I grow up. You seem like a pretty cool guy. And Jorah's like, yeah, you don't want this one thing that I've got, though. This little spot of cootie that I have developing on my forearm. It's really not great. Yeah, so that looked like it was getting pretty bad.
It does look like it's gone really got a whole forearm thing going on.
Yeah, this is the 24 thing. This is the ticking clock. He is the Jack Bauer of this season. He's just got this horrible virus that's festering within him. You got to imagine that bomb goes off here.
I thought you were gonna say he was the George Mason.
Yeah, that's probably the better comparison. Yeah, he kind of even looks like George Mason a little bit.
A little bit.
Mason.
He's gonna have to fly the dragon with the bomb.
Right. Yeah. He's going to kick Dany off. He's like, I know how to fly one of these things.
Yeah,
I can do it.
Give me the bucket of wildfire. I'll go and drop it off. Okay. Yeah. On the Masters. Okay. And then let's check in with Arya, who just gets a beating from Arya 2. Boy, I really got a good hate into this Arya 2.
Is there really anything else to talk about with that Arya storyline other than Arya 2, you are the worst. You are such a jerk.
Yeah.
Why are you beating up this poor blind girl?
Right. Now, did Arya get kicked out of the House of Black and White?
We don't really know what the details are of that. She gets blinded at the end of season 5. She's in the Hall of Faces when that happens, and then the very next thing we see is she's groveling on the street. I think that the fact that Arya 2 is checking in on her, I don't think that that's just out of spite. I think that training is still going on. She says, I'll see you tomorrow. Unless it's that Arya 2 has a real hate into Arya, and it is literally just her kicking her around for no reason at all.
Yeah, I'm on my break. Let me come down here and give you a beat down and head back.
Lunch break, time to go beat up Arya Stark. That's not impossible, but I think what's more likely is that this is further training for Arya, and that being blind is supposed to open up some new doors for her.
I do feel that my takeaway is, though, that the Arya blindness is temporary. Do you get that same feeling?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that, especially if that's the way that it's going, where it's, if this is further training, we blinded you to, see things through a little bit more. That would be my read on it as well.
I think when she graduates, when she becomes no one, that's when she's going to start to see again.
It's like, oh, I can see again. This is great.
Okay. Anything else you want to touch on before we jump into some of the questions from the people watching us live? Got a great live audience right now.
Oh, that's awesome. No, let's hop into it. Let's waste no more time. Let's talk to the people. I'm very curious to get everybody's take on the episode.
All right. Why don't you get us started here with James Snow?
All right, James Snow. Yeah, John's brother. James Snow says, if Mel can repel 10 million viewers so easily, what chance do 40 Night's Watchmen have? Ah, so sad.
Yeah.
That's so sad. Yeah, so what's Melisandre's move gonna be? Because Davos is like, yeah, we've got a red woman, we're gonna be able to take these guys down. Like, are they gonna do another shadow baby thing? And if so, who's the lucky guy?
Who's the father of the shadow baby?
Who's the father? Who's the daddy?
Yeah,
Daddy
boy.
Davos.
Yeah, does she wear the necklace or no?
I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to figure that out. Yeah. This is from Baronessa. High Sparrow was playing good cop to the nasty bad cop, except a big a-hole. Wow, is that the official name?
Yeah, I mean, that is not the official name. I did write it down.
That's the Unella.
Yeah. Yes. That's always what he does. He's always the good cop.
He's always playing good cop. He's always playing, I think that even when he's being really stern, he has this sort of paternal thing about him where he's fairly mild-mannered. So yeah, I feel like Septa Unella, she's really the one, you don't want to be after school with Septa Unella. That's a really bad time.
Okay. Robert Miller wants to know, was anyone else disappointed by the killing of Duran and Arya Hota this early? We didn't get to see them do anything.
Yeah, I know. I think that with the way that they were just shaped in season 5, I think that just from the jump, they just never really got that storyline right. And, if they were able to pivot with the Sand Snakes here, maybe theoretically they could have pivoted with Arya and Prince Doran and everything there. For me, I just feel like I would rather the Sand Snakes have some teeth, and if that comes at the expense of these two characters, I can live with that.
Yeah, it seems like that the Doran stuff was always pretty talky, and so at least they're just sort of just feels like they're just taking the papers and just like yeah, let's just clear the deck on this and hit the reset button. And move on from here.
Yeah, I think so. This is more on Dorne from Sarah Blackfire, who says, so any idea where the Dorne plot is going if we see more of Ilaria and the Sand Snakes this season? Will Ilaria take over ruling Dorne, or maybe will someone poison her? Yeah, I think that we're going to see Ilaria Sand being, Queen of Dorne. I think that she is going to be, looking at Dorne as hers at this point, and she's going to be leading the way.
Yeah, it does seem like the gender thing is a big deal in Dorne, where she even says, like, never again will a weak man rule Dorne, where the history of Dorne, I feel like, is all about, strong women, and I think we're going to see where Ilaria ends up like bringing the Dornish army into this.
Yeah, no, the history of Dorne, I can't recommend enough. The World of Ice and Fire, which is like this big coffee table book from George R. R. Martin and the people behind Westeros.org that they released, I think like a year and a half ago at this point. And there's a great section on the history of Dorne and how that all came to be. Very strong women characters in there. I think that we're seeing a rebirth of that on the show at the very least.
Okay. John Stevens says, apparently growing up in Winterfell prevents you from dying of hypothermia. Well, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, they're just really used to the cold. That's why the Starks are better prepared for this than anybody else. That's why they say winter is coming. They're literally spending their entire lives getting ready for this thing.
Yeah.
But it did look really super cold. In that.
I mean, it's cold, and winter is coming. It's getting colder.
Winter is coming. That scene was shot in the summer, actually, according to the actors. So it was pretty warm while they were doing all of that stuff. So good on you, TV show, making it look really cold.
Okay. Geek Furious says, best thing about this episode was that virtually none of it will be in the next novel, and they constructed it well enough that it was fun to watch. I think it's the best of both worlds for book readers who don't want to be spoiled too much.
Yeah.
This is probably a controversial take, but what do you think about this as a staunch book reader, Josh?
Well, Geek Furious knows, because Geek Furious listens to those book club podcasts. He knows that I'm on board with that. Like that is the way that I view Game of Thrones. At this point, Game of Thrones is its own thing. A Song of Ice and Fire is its own thing that may never get finished. And at a certain point, you have to disconnect the two. And there have been a lot of differences between the two already anyway. So much that is faithful, if not exactly to the plot, then at least tonally is very faithful. But we're just at a point where there are no books right now to adapt. And this show has to move forward. One season per year. It has to happen. HBO has a ton invested in this. And I think for Benioff and Weiss, David Benioff and Dan Weiss, who write the show, I think that it's got to be pretty liberating for them, probably scary on some level, but liberating on another, that they can really just tell the story the way they want to tell it. And the way that the show has already been paced out with so many deviations in the past really necessitates the show paving its own way forward in a way that is probably going to look really different from the books. I'm really good with that. I know a lot of people are not, but I'm pretty agnostic about that. I think whenever that next book comes out, hopefully it's going to be really good and exciting when filled with its own surprises. And the show so far in this one episode, to me, proves that when it can just veer off into its own territory, it's still very engaging and exciting. So I'm with Geek Furious. I'm really happy about it. I think it is the best of both worlds.
Josh, I'm sure you must have written about this for The Hollywood Reporter, but there was news this week about what the final episodes of Game of Thrones could look like following this season of a season 7 that would be split up into 2 years of like a block of 7 episodes and a block of 6 episodes. Were you thumbs up or thumbs down about that idea?
I'm with whatever they want to do. If Benioff and Weiss, and I got to email with them a little bit back and forth. There's a story about that on THR of them saying between 10 and 15 episodes left after season 6 is done. That's where their head is at this point. I feel like we'll find out officially sometime soon. I hope. If that's where if they think that that's all that they need to finish up this story, they've paced this really, really well so far. I'm up for that. I also think that whenever Game of Thrones ends, reset the watch and wait for that next Ice and Fire TV show. I feel like we are not going to be done with Westeros for a long time, but I think that this particular story set in Westeros, I do feel like it's got an expiration date, and to me, it's exciting that it might be coming up fairly soon. I think that can only be good, that we're getting into some endgame stuff. It means that this should be a pretty fast season.
Okay. Then let's get into It's Really. What powers does the gem in Melisandre's necklace have more than keeping her look young? Can any of those powers somehow bring Jon Snow back? In terms of everything we know in the Game of Thrones mythology, did that speak to you, the jewel in the center of that necklace?
No, nothing off the top of my head. Maybe she puts the amulet around Jon Snow's neck and it just like Weekend at Bernie's him, and he's now just like up and about.
And he dances when there's music playing?
Right, yeah, he's like the toaster in Ghostbusters 2 when you put the pink slime in. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Who knows? Okay. What about Shanker Pad?
All right, Shanker Pad says, do all red priestesses use glamours alter their appearance to seduce or manipulate their targets? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, they all seem to be very, very attractive. And maybe they're underneath all of this. Who knows?
Oh boy, that would really change everything.
Yeah. You just really can't trust those red priests. You just don't know what they look like underneath it all. Once again from Geek Furious, is Melisandre's next glamour becoming Jon Snow? Whoa, what about that? What if Melisandre just becomes Jon Snow? She's like, I'm going to be him now. That's going to be my move. I'm going to make myself look like Kit Harington.
So Jon Snow will be dead. I guess we're getting a little Lost now. So now it's not actually Jon Snow. It's Melisandre inhabiting Jon Snow's body. So Jon Snow is dead.
Yeah, the woman
Jon Snow is dead. But Kit Harington will continue as Melisandre's character.
That's the theory. That'd be wild. That'd be wild. I don't know.
Boy.
I think I would ship that one. I don't know if I would ship that one off to Samoa. I think that maybe we could leave that on the bench.
Yeah, well, Melisandre in Jon Snow's body, that might truly be the song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, that could be. That could be the one.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's not a leading theory for me.
Yes. Okay, what about It's Really wants to know, why didn't Jaime turn around when Marcella started dying on the boat? They were so close to the shore. Wouldn't he wanted to try to get some help on land, or he knew that they who poisoned her would rather sail to King's Landing? Wouldn't that be a bad idea, though, to sail back to Dorne after they assassinated Marcella?
Yeah, because then at that point they're like, ooh, this is awkward, and then they probably assassinate Jaime, right?
Yeah.
I feel like he turns around and immediately gets assassinated.
My big question is about the sand snakes that were stowaways in the boat.
Yeah, continuity is not on the side of this. HBO...
Weren't they all on the shore with...
Yeah, they were on the dock. They were on the dock watching that ship go away. And HBO did their whole big Game of Thrones marathon today and over the weekend. And I was rewatching that scene where Hilaria Sand rubs the lipstick off and takes the antidote and everything. She's got all three of the sand snakes with her in that scene. And suddenly two of them have just found their way onto the ship with Trystane. I don't know. You just at some point you just gotta look past that, but continuity error. The continuity police are probably not.
Okay, so then after they wiped off the lipstick, then they got in another boat. They followed that boat to King's Landing. Yes. And then when it docked, then they snuck on.
Yeah, that's what happened. That's how they did it.
Nobody from King's Landing saw them. Some random sand snakes.
Just went completely over their heads.
Rowing a boat over there. Okay. Let's take some more of these Twitter questions. Okay. Arya's training has taken a Jedi-like turn. I can't see a thing without the blast shield down. That's. What do you think of that?
That's what she's doing. I mean, that would be fun to see her on the deck of the Millennium Falcon, just battling lasers off and getting yelled at by Wookiees.
Yeah. Spicy Wasabi wants to know: are you in on the Sand Snakes now? Did they redeem themselves, Josh?
I'm curious. I'm definitely more in on them than I have been in the past. This is the most exciting Sand Snake stuff that we've seen on the show. Period. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see where this goes. I have been burned by Dorne before, so I'm not getting too excited yet.
It's very hot there.
Very hot. Yeah, I got a really nasty sunburn.
Yeah. What else do you have from Twitter, Josh?
I don't have anything offhand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then let me give you a couple more. This is let's see, from what happens first. This is from Bradley Huffer. Cersei brings war to Dorne, or Dorne brings war to King's Landing?
I think that Dorne. I feel like Dorne at this point is interested in making proactive moves. I feel like we are seeing that from Illyria's actions in this episode. I think that Illyria is incentivized to move against Cersei and Jaime and the Lannisters. She wants to shut that down. So that's where my head is at. I think that they're going to be making a move at some point this season.
Okay. Muffin That Sucks wants to know, so the line of succession in Dorne includes the bastard whore of the king's dead brother?
Apparently, yeah. Or, at a certain point, you just take that ish by force. And, who's left to really argue you on that? Okay. I think eventually, when Illyria's just going around poisoning and stabbing people, you're kind of just like, oh, yeah, Khaleesi, you're
she
the queen now.
Yeah.
Just fall in line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Derek Blaze wants to know, does it seem out of character for Thorne to give an ultimatum to Davos? I feel like he would just kill them.
Yeah, if Thorne is the guy that Davos is saying, oh, we should not open that door, he's just going to kill us. If that read is accurate, what's really the big deal? Why can't they just knock that door down? Why don't they just barge in and kill all the people inside of there? If that's really what Thorne wants to do, why isn't he just doing it right now?
Does Thorne know that Stannis is dead? Is there some sort of a deference that he's paying to Davos?
Oh, that's possible, where he's like, I don't want to piss off Stannis. Right. Stannis is still out there. I really don't want to kill his second in command. That could be really bad.
And
that Stannis guy's a real dweeb.
Maybe Thorne is also sort of sensitive to that. Does he think that, the Lannister claim to the throne is bupkis and feels like that Stannis is the rightful king? And so, let me at least, I don't know. We'd have to go back and take a look. What does Thorne know? Or maybe it's unclear.
Yeah, I think it's unclear right now. I mean, Davos really didn't spend a ton of time at the wall after being sent there by Stannis. I think all of that kind of happened pretty quickly. And to my knowledge, there's not a Thorne and Davos scene of just the two of them talking about stuff. That'd be a great thing, though.
Okay.
Just eating mutton.
Yeah. Try the mutton. It's great.
It's really good.
Let's talk a little bit about the people we did not see tonight. Okay, we did not see Bran tonight. I think that's probably going to be high up on the priority list for next week's episode.
Looks like it. Yeah, I mean, Bran is making his big comeback this season, but they are just continuing to hype it up by pushing it off one more week. So the Bran show waits at least another week. I think whenever that comes in, it's going to be pretty good.
He got the Arya treatment, who did not appear in the premiere episode last season.
There's a lot of masters to serve here on Game of Thrones.
Not just in Meereen.
Not just in Meereen. Just generally when you look at the show. Lots of characters, lots of storylines. So not everybody's going to make it in every episode.
Okay. Anybody else that was a notable absence for you in the premiere?
No Samwell. No Sam.
Yeah, no Sam.
No, we're just heading south. It's just happening. We're on the road with Gilly. So nothing there. No White Walker action. Not yet. Gotta imagine that'll come up at some point soon. Those guys must be getting close.
Okay, Josh, could you give us a preview of some of the things you're working on for Hollywood Reporter?
Sure. So my recap is up there right now. I had a chat with Liam Cunningham, who plays Davos. That's currently published. I have a piece going up in a couple of hours as of this recording. If you're listening to the audio archives, it's probably up already. That is talking to a bunch of people who are just sort of weighing in on the fact that, yeah, Jon Snow's dead. That's where we are right now. That's the lay of the land. Tomorrow on Monday, I will have a piece that goes a little deeper into the Sansa and Theon scene and Brienne scene from this past episode, and lots of other stuff coming throughout the week. It's going to be very fun stuff. Heavy amounts of reporting on the Hollywood Reporter from Josh Wigler on Game of Thrones content throughout the season. Very exciting stuff.
Other than following @RoundHoward on Twitter, what's the easiest way to access all that?
I don't know. Make a URL, Rob. You can get the magical webmasters on it. The webmasters.
Okay. The webmasters will work on that. We'll have that nailed down for you by the feedback show, and we'll also post it in the podcast show notes here on postshowrecaps.com. Of course, feedback show is coming up. We take your emails, we take your phone calls, we take your comments, and we answer them all in one feedback show. Go send your emails to got@postshowrecaps.com or go to postshowrecaps.com/voicemail.
Perfect. Good stuff. And yeah, get those book club questions in by Tuesday morning at the latest. Terry Schwartz and I are going to be recording on Tuesday afternoon.
How do people send in a book club question? Same idea?
Same idea. Just make sure you're saying spoiler or book club in the subject line, and we will know which podcast you are talking about.
All right. There you go, Josh. What's the hashtag?
Ooh, hashtag. What does the chat room say? Any suggestions from you guys? Anything good?
What about Ride or Direwolf?
Ride or Direwolf? I'm up for that. We'll see. I think that Ghost really is a Ride or Direwolf.
Okay. All right, so let's go with that. And then, of course, you can subscribe to our Game of Thrones podcast. Make sure you don't miss any of it by going to postshowrecaps.com/GOT iTunes or search for Post Show Recaps Game of Thrones in your favorite pod catcher. And of course, we do appreciate that. We Post Show Recaps, we're looking to be nominated for the TV and Film Podcast of the Year. You could do that at podcastawards.com for your consideration.
Consider it and then do it. Just do it. You know you want to.
All right. Thanks so much to Alex Kidwell behind the scenes for pulling so many of those questions. Greatly appreciate that. Josh, anything else?
Nothing else. That's it. That's everything.
All right. We'll talk to you on the feedback and the book club shows during the week. See more at postshowrecaps.com. Take care. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.